Hi everyone. Today I decided to make a creamy onion and potato soup, and for this I used my number 9 Wagner deep skillet. I really love using this skillet because it's deeper than standard skillet, which is excellent for roasting chicken, or you can even make soup stocks. And first I'm going to use a low to medium heat, and I'm going to add a good amount of beef tallow. Now the beef tallow, it cooks very similar to butter. The consistency is pretty much the same. It just adds a little bit more of that beefy flavor to it. And what I did was I added about 4 or 5 medium-sized yellow onions, which I sliced pretty thin, but not super thin. And I just want to evenly stir it so that way all the onions do get a nice even coating of the beef tallow. And then I'm going to put that lid on there. Again, I'm keeping the heat nice and low, and I put the lid on there because the onions have a lot of water. And so as it heats up, it's going to generate a lot of steam, and then the lid just kind of self-base and allows that condensation to just fall back into the pan. And I keep the heat low so I'm not caramelizing or burning the onions. The onions do require about 30 minutes or so, but halfway through, I'm going to add about 3 or 4 medium-sized yellow potatoes. I prefer to use the yellow potatoes for this recipe because yellow potatoes have more of a creamier texture than using like a russet potato would. But after the 30 minutes of the onions and potatoes cooking, what I'm going to then do is I'm going to add a chicken stock. Now, I did have some leftover chicken stock that I made last week, but if you don't have your own homemade chicken stock, you can use store-bought chicken stock, or you can add water and some chicken bouillon or chicken seasoning to that, and it'll still come out pretty good. But going with your own homemade stock is definitely the way to go. It just has more pronounced flavors, and it's more nutritious, has lots of vitamins and minerals. After adding that stock, I'm going to put the heat on to medium or so, and then I'm going to add some salt and pepper. Now, I'm going to make sure not to add too much at this time because you can always add more seasoning later on, but you just want to add small amounts at a time because it's always easier to add more than to try and fix it if you've added too much. Now, if you do add too much at this time, it's okay because later on you're still going to add some milk or cream to it, which is going to kind of help take away some of those flavors a little bit, or you can always add more water as well. So I got that up to a boil and I simmer for about 15 to 20 minutes or so, and all the potatoes and onions are thoroughly cooked at this point. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ladle out about 50 or 60% of all the onions, potatoes, and stock that are in there. I'm going to ladle it into a blender. And then I'm just going to puree that. Because there's potatoes in there, when you puree it, what's going to be in that blender, it's going to be really, really thick. And because I use the potatoes and the puree is going to be really thick, I'm going to then add milk instead of heavy cream or half and half because I don't want it to be super thick like a bisque. I still want it to have a little bit of liquid without it being super thick. Now, if you wanted to, you could puree everything and leave yourself with a bisque, and it would still be really good, but you wouldn't have, the textures from the onions and the potatoes. So I only do about 50 to 60% of what's in there. On the blender, I do start it at the lowest speed, and then gradually I'll increase the speed. It only takes about 30, 40 seconds or so overall. The onions and the potatoes they're cooked and they're really soft, so it doesn't take too long to puree those to a nice consistency. But once you're done blending, you're just going to pour it back into the cast iron with the onions and potatoes and remaining stock. Then you'll just mix that around, and then I'm going to go ahead and add my milk just to get a nice consistency. So with the milk or the cream, you're just looking to get consistency. It's not really going to add a whole lot if anything, to the flavor. It might dull some of the flavors, which is why you're going to have to adjust your seasoning afterwards. I did end up adding a little bit more salt and pepper, and I even added a little bit of cayenne pepper flakes in there, just ground cayenne pepper, just to give it a little bit of heat. But I didn't want to go like super spicy or anything with that. But I will turn the heat back on to a low. It's already cooked, so I don't want to continue further cooking it because that's just going to reduce and boil off excess water, making the soup more thick, which I don't want to do. But if you do boil it off too much, you can always add a little bit more water. That's not a big deal. So after adding the milk, gonna get that nice consistency and then just finally adjust the seasoning. And while that's finishing off, what I did was I took some thick cut bacon and put it in my air fryer just to get it nice and crispy. And then I'm going to chop that up when it's done to turn it into bacon bits. And when I serve this, I'm going to ladle the soup into a bowl. And then I'm going to put some shredded cheddar cheese on top, some of those bacon bits, and then fresh chives. I'm really happy with the way this soup turned out. It's really nice. It's still winter and cold here, and this was just a really good soup for lunch.